Hello and welcome to Middle East Matters here on France 24. In the show this week, how does the Iran war end? After weeks of Donald Trump insisting a deal is just around the corner, violence has flared again. Part of the challenge for the US president is that he and Benjamin Netanyahu, allies though they may be, no longer have the same priorities. Washington wants an out from a war that is roiling oil markets and is increasingly unpopular at home. And Israel's prime minister? Well, with elections that must be held by the end of October and a criminal investigation hanging over his head, his political survival is once again at the heart of his geo-strategic calculations. Well, we will discuss all of that in just a moment with the Israeli analyst Raz Zimt. But first, our report by Karis Garland.
A resurgence of attacks across the Middle East. The US and Iran again traded strikes after Washington blamed Tehran for the crash of an American helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz. It comes after Iran exchanged fire with Israel for the first time since the April ceasefire. Tehran launched a barrage of missiles towards Israel on Sunday, calling it retaliation for an Israeli strike on an area of the Lebanese capital where Hezbollah has significant support. Israel returned fire. Iranian state television reported that attacks killed at least 2 members of the country's air defense units. Iran's military then said it was halting strikes, but added they would resume if Israel continued to attack Lebanon. Israel, which hasn't stopped its military campaign there, took a menacing tone.
The strike we carried out in Iran was preparation for a much more significant and severe blow. We are prepared to return and deliver another hard and deep strike against Iran.
The Israel-Iran escalation wasn't welcomed by US President Donald Trump, who is under increasing pressure to settle the conflict in the Middle East. On Monday, Trump voiced exasperation with both countries, telling them to stop shooting. Despite this public objection, Benjamin Netanyahu showed he was willing to defy the president.
Israel has the full right to self-defense, and we exercise it whenever necessary. I say this to you, dear citizens of Israel, just as I say it with appreciation and respect in my good conversations with my friend, President Trump.
The Israeli Prime Minister is under pressure at home, where opposition politicians have accused him of not acting forcefully enough on Iran and of being Trump's puppet. These voices are likely to challenge Netanyahu in upcoming elections, which must be held by October 27th.
And with me on the programme then is Dr. Raz Zimt. He's the director of the Iran and Shiite Axis research programme at Israel's Institute for National Security Studies. Hello to you, and thank you for speaking to the programme.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to talk to you today. First of all, let's talk about this most recent escalation then, the United States having carried out a number of strikes on Iranian targets, that in retaliation for the apparent Iranian downing of an American helicopter. In your view, from an Israeli perspective, is this resumption of direct hostilities between the US and Iran good news for Israel, good news for Netanyahu, or not at all?
I'm not sure. I think that sporadic clashes between Iran and the United States doesn't necessarily mean that the resumption of hostilities between Iran and the United States. I think that from the Israeli point of view, Israel would certainly want to see the resumption of hostilities between Iran and the United States and Israel, but only assuming that the resumption of hostilities will address the main priority from the Israeli perspective, and this is to addressing the issue, or the nuclear issue. If it's just attacks on Iran's energy facilities or aerial defense system, this is not the right way from the Israeli point of view to move forward.
And on that question then of Iran's nuclear facilities and efforts towards degrading it, I mean, have been long conversations now, haven't there, about efforts towards finding a deal and the question of whether or not Iran's nuclear program would be included in that deal and whether that might look different to the 2015 deal that was negotiated under the Barack Obama US administration. Where do you think we are in terms of negotiations regarding a nuclear deal?
I think that that we have two major problems right now. One is that even if Iran and the U.S. are ready and able to reach the MOU, it's very clear that this MOU will not really address the nuclear issue. It will mostly address the issue of this, I would say, equation between the Hormuz Strait, the opening of Hormuz Strait, and ending the naval blockade. Only in the second stage will we see a more detailed negotiations on the Iran's nuclear program. And here we get to the second problem, which is certainly from the Israeli point of view, the likelihood that Iran will accept what Israel considers to be a good deal. And a good deal is not just a deal which would address the issue of the 60% enriched uranium or the number of years in which Iran will accept to suspend its enrichment, but also taking care of the 20%, the 3.67% enrichment, the underground compounds, the advanced centrifuges, the IEA inspections. All those issues have to be addressed. And unfortunately, for now, it doesn't seem very likely that Iran and the United States will be able to bridge the gaps and reach such a detailed and good deal.
Is Israel frozen out of those negotiations?
Problem is that when Israel made the decision to join forces with the United States, and I think it was the obvious decision made by the Israeli government, the main advantage of this decision was that Israel could share could join force with the U.S. In order to make better operational results in Iran. But the main disadvantage of going to war with the United States is that it was very clear from the beginning that the decision on when to end the war, how to end the war, and what will be the political implications of the war rest with President Trump. And so I think that while Israel can try and convince President Trump to make sure that at least some of the issues concerning Iran's nuclear program are addressed, if not during the MOU, then afterwards in the second stage of negotiations, I think it's very clear that other than trying to convince President Trump, there is nothing Israel can do at this point.
And so do you think it is true then what Trump told the Financial Times earlier on this week in relation to Benjamin Netanyahu, that I call the shots, that actually Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't have much power here at all?
The only power Prime Minister Netanyahu has is, again, trying to convince President Trump to stick with the shared objectives of both Israel and the United States concerning the nuclear issue. But we have to realize that at this point, it's very clear that the main priority from the U.S. perspective, and I can certainly understand that, is to open the Strait of Hormuz. The nuclear issue is very important. I think that President Trump will not agree to end this war without some Iranian concessions on the nuclear issue, but I think there is a very big difference between what he can live with and what Israel can live with.
And what about more broadly? We know that there will be elections in Israel. They have to be held at some point before the end of October this year. And by that point, Israel will have been at war for 3 years non-stop. And we have Hamas still a force in Gaza, the Iranian regime very much still in play in Tehran, and Hezbollah a weakened force, but still there in Lebanon. So Netanyahu needs a win, doesn't he, ahead of October, ahead of that election, and nothing for the moment looks settled.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you. I think that the main problem today is that despite all the military and operational successes or achievements Israel have achieved in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, even in Iran, despite the fact that the main political objectives were not addressed, I think the main problem is that all those achievements were not translated or transformed into a more sustainable, stable political settlement and strategic achievements. And therefore, when Prime Minister Netanyahu has to deal with growing voices inside Iran, not just from his partners or his rivals in the political system, but most importantly from the Israeli public opinion. For example, you mentioned the situation in Lebanon. I think that it's more important to see and listen to the voices coming from the the leaders of the Israeli communities in the northern part of Israel rather than to hear to the opposition. And here I think it's very difficult for Netanyahu to provide good answer to the question why all those achievements were not translated into strategic victories in none of the arenas.
And what do you think Netanyahu can try to do then to carve out something that looks like a win, whether that is in Lebanon or in these negotiations with Iran before the elections in October?
I'm not sure if he can. He can try to do something in Gaza, but I doubt it if any real operational campaign right now in Gaza will have major impact on the situation in Gaza and the situation with Hamas. In Lebanon, unfortunately, Israel is constrained, mostly because President Trump doesn't want Israel to strike Beirut in order to avoid further escalation with Iran. And concerning Iran, as I pointed out, it's a decision to be decided by Trump. So if the hostilities between the Iranians and the Americans resume in Iran, and Israel might try to convince President Trump to move forward and try to implement some of the plans which were not implemented until the ceasefire. For example, this plan to try and address the nuclear issue through boots on the ground or special forces. This might be used by Netanyahu to show at least one major accomplishment when it comes to Iran nuclear program. But other than that, I think that we are quite stuck, because even in Lebanon, despite the fact that we are negotiating with the Lebanese government, at the end of the day, the decision whether to stick to the ceasefire is made not by the Lebanese government, but by Iran and Hezbollah.
And just a final question, very briefly for you, if you can. We've heard allegedly that Trump told Netanyahu, "You are effing crazy. You'd be in prison because of me." That after, as I said earlier, he said, "I call the shots in my relationship with the Israeli Prime Minister." How much of their personal relationship now hinges upon what happens next in the region?
Look, I'm not sure, but I think that the main problem right now is that we've certainly seen a shift and some kind of differences of opinions between Prime Minister Netanyahu, who needs to see something more significant in Iran in order to improve his position inside Israel, and President Trump, who seems to be very much unwilling to go back to hostilities in Iran, despite what he tweeted this morning. And I think that if at the beginning of the war we could see a more identity between the objectives of Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, I think that right now it's quite clear that they don't share necessarily the same objectives and the same trajectory how to move forward both in Lebanon and in Iran.
All right, Dr. Raz Zimt, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been watching Middle East Matters here on France 24. Goodbye from me.
Three countries, 48 teams, 104 matches. One world watching. From Mexico to Canada to the United States. No borders, no limits. This is global. This is history in motion. One mission, one dream to make history. Football goes into orbit. From June 11th to July 19th. Experience it here on Earth on France 24. Your stories inspire the future. Your daily lives create the news. Your cultures, struggles and successes are at the heart of our programs. We tell the stories of those who made our planet and those who are building it. We tell the story of the world, shaped by the lives of those who live there.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.